The last feature we're going to look at is the subtotal feature, and as we start project 3, you'll notice that we are going, in order to create subtotals, we do have to convert this table back to a normal range, and we'll use the convert to range button to do that. You'll notice also after we get it back to a normal range, we'll sort the rows by a specific field or maybe several fields, and then we'll add the subtotals to it. At the end of project 3, there's also a feature that deals with grouping and ungrouping data, and I'm not going to cover that particular part. So we just have the subtotal feature that we're going to look at in project 3. Alright, as you'll read through page 88 there, basically the subtotals are used for a range of data with a column that has multiple rows with the same field value that can be grouped, and then subtotals or any built-in function can be applied to that group automatically. So for example, they're showing at the bottom these fees due for each one of the attorneys. You get a total fees due for each one of the attorneys are listed there below, and you can see how they've collapsed it after the subtotal feature has been used, and you don't see the individual client records, you only see the totals that were generated from those activities. So we're going to begin project 3A first of all by removing the banded columns from our list. So I'm going to go back to the Table Tools Design tab, and we'll click off the first column there, and then we'll also click off the banded columns. We want those all to be the same color. And then just want to make a special notation here. When you go to the Data tab, in the outline group you see the subtotal option. It is not available, it's dimmed to us while we're still in the table mode, or if we're using the list as a table. So in order to use the subtotal feature, we do have to convert it to a range. So to do that, one way to do it is if you go back to the Table Tools Design tab, in the Tools group you should see Convert to Range. It'll say, do you want to convert the table to a normal range? Yes, we do. Notice it removes the filters and you no longer have the Table Tools Design tab. So now it is a normal Excel range, and from here I just want to up front mention that we are going to calculate the total fees due for each one of the attorneys. Now, in order to do that, in order for it to look organized, we do need to sort by attorney first. And they don't necessarily bring that to our attention initially, they just tell us to start in sorting. But if you don't have them sorted correctly and grouped together, sorting helps you to group them together by likeness. And so if you don't have them grouped together, then your fees due, the total fees due, will look pretty scrambled. You'll know when you run the subtotal feature, if you've got a lot of different subtotals that don't really mean anything, then you probably didn't sort or group them together before you applied the subtotal feature. So the first thing that we are going to do is sort by last name. Now they go on a step further and say that they want to sort by client and then by date. So that's fine, get a multiple sort going on, but again, they're grouping those together first. So the custom sort, you'll go back to your Data tab, and actually when you do a sort at this point, we do need to select the area. So we're going to select A4 through K27, 25, because we didn't add the other records previously. So that's why we only have probably 24 records, because we're counting the first row. And they're talking about having 26 records, so in project 3A. So that's why we're a little bit off on the number of rows that we're highlighting. So, but you do want to select that area since we've removed the table feature, and then we can go up to the Data tab, choose Sort. We want to sort by last name, attorney last name. We're going to sort then by, if we have more than one attorney last name, which we do, then we want to sort by client. And if we have more than one client number, then we want to sort by date. And all these we're leaving in kind of ascending order, A to Z if it's text, client number smallest to largest, so that's ascending order, and date is oldest to newest. Okay, I'll click OK. Now you can see all the last names are grouped together. Okay, and if you have multiple last names, then it's looking to the client. If you have multiple client numbers, then it's looking to the date and putting those in ascending order. Okay, so now once we have them grouped, then we can use the subtotal feature. Now if you'll notice from the data tab in the outline group, the subtotal button is now selected for us. Okay, and again, since this is not a table necessarily, we do need to select our data that we're applying the subtotal feature to. So again, I'm going to select that range, and we'll go back to the subtotal button. Alright, at each change in, you want to ask yourself when it changes from one grouping to another, and in our case, the group that we're switching, which is attorney last name, when it switches from the last attorney last name to a new one, we want to start recalculating our totals. So if you figured out what to sort by, if you know that it's the attorney last name, then this at each change in will also be the same field, which is attorney last name. We want to find total fees due, so total is sum. If you wanted average or maximum or the highest or lowest or whatever, you could choose whatever function you want there, but we do want total, so we're going to leave it at sum. And then the last one's selected, but kind of watch that. It always picks up, I think, on the last field. So in our case, that is what we want. We want the fees due, but if it were the rate or the billable hours that we were wanting to calculate, then you definitely need to deselect the fees due and select the appropriate field. Also notice at the bottom for right now, the options are replace current subtotals and summary below data. So we're going to leave those as is. A little bit later on, we will come back and do another subtotal where we'll remove that check mark, and it won't replace the current subtotals that we have. So right now we'll just leave it all as is, and I'll click OK. And now you can see the attorney last name, all the Martinez. The total for those, $3,302.50. And then it goes down. O'Donovan, total for that is $1,268. Sullivan total. So you can see the totals there. Now notice also when we use the subtotal feature, the outline on the left-hand side. Now this is where it allows you to kind of group things together and hide clients if you don't actually want to see them. If you only want to see the totals are for each of the attorneys, you could. If you click on the number 2, that collapses and hides the records and shows you just the totals for the attorneys. Okay, and you could take that information, you could chart it, you could copy it to another sheet, another application, all kinds of things that you could do with that information. You're also going to see a grand total here for all the fees. Alright, a 3 will uncollapse it so you see all of the records again. The number 1 will give you just the grand total fees due. Okay, so 2 gives you each of the categories, kind of groups those together. 3 will uncollapse them. Now, if for some reason you're passing this information on to maybe Martinez and you want to show that person, is this a Rosa, this attorney that you want to show them the individual clients and their amounts, but you don't want to show necessarily the other individual amounts, you can collapse the other attorneys by clicking on these minus signs, and it'll show you what the total is, the total fees due for those attorneys, but it doesn't give you the individual amounts. So that's another way that you can customize the subtotals. And again, to pull them all back, I'm just going to press the 3 or click on the 3, and that pulls them all back. Alright, now let's say that we want to add a little bit more information here. We want to know how many clients, so we want to count how many of these clients that each one of the attorneys have. So we'll count, and you could count any of these fields really, but we want to keep the totals under fees due. And we also want to find what the average fees due are. So again, we're going to just use the subtotal feature to do that, since we already have it set up so that they're grouped together. Alright. If I go back into the subtotal dialog box, it'll bring up what I originally had, which is great. That's what we want. But this time, instead of the sum, we want to count. I'm going to choose the count feature, or the count function. And down at the bottom, what we'll do differently here is we'll deselect the replace current subtotals. If we deselect that, then that'll just add it to what we have there. It'll still show the totals. And if we don't, if we would leave the replace current subtotals, it would remove total and put count in there. So it would replace it. And there are times for both of those, but we want to add, kind of keep track of what's going on here. So I'm going to deselect that, click OK, and now we have a count line. So there are 9 clients for Martinez, 3 for O'Donovan. You can see there 5. See the counts on all those. And it kept the totals for the fees due for each of the attorneys as well. Okay, we're going to add one more. We want to find the average fees due. So go back to subtotal. Function is going to be switched to average. And again, we're just going to leave that D selected and click OK. And now we have the average fees due, we've got the count, and we've got total for each one of these attorneys. Okay, and again, you could collapse these depending on what you wanted to show. Okay, you're getting some additional levels there. But you could hide all the records or all the clients for each one of them and just give these summaries for the various attorneys. All right, now I'm going to do one more that's not in the book necessarily, just to give you an idea of what's going on here. I'm going to uncollapse all of these again, and I'm going to remove the subtotals. So one way to do that is to go back to the subtotal button, lower left-hand corner is remove all. All right. Now the next type of subtotal I want us to do is I want us to see what the, I don't know, I'm just going to say average fees due are for each of the areas. So we want to know how much the average fees due for the insurance area or for the employment area. Whatever those specialize in, we want to see what, maybe you'd want to know how much one makes over the other. But by doing that, the first thing that you have to do is sort by the area. You've got to get those areas grouped together. Now I'm going to do it once without sorting, and you'll see what kind of a mess it makes. So I'm going to select, I'm going to do a subtotal from the get-go without sorting. Okay, subtotal. When it changes areas, right, we want insurance, all the insurance, and when it changes to real estate, we want it to recalculate. So the area, the function is going to leave average. We want the average fees due, and the replace current subtotals, I'll put that back in there just because that was the default earlier, but it doesn't have to be in there. And then I'll click OK. Now notice what happens here. When it changes areas from insurance to employment, those two are added together, but that's not all the insurance. There's another insurance down here. And that's the last one. But you can see they're not grouped together. So that's the disadvantage of not having them sorted or grouped. Now I'm just going to undo, since sorting was the last thing that, or subtotaling was the last thing that I did. Okay, so as I mentioned before, the goal here is to sort by area. Okay, so sort it first. I'm going to go into the custom sort. We'll clear out, let me cancel out this for just a minute. Let me go back to the home tab, sort. I wanted to clear, but I can't clear it from there. So let's just go back into the custom sort. We'll delete levels here, and then we'll end up with area. And A to Z is fine. You could certainly do it in descending order. It doesn't matter. The purpose of sorting is to get them grouped together. Okay, and I'll click OK. So now they're grouped by area. You can see in ascending order, but they're all grouped by area. Then when we go back into subtotal, with the data tab, subtotal, again, when the area changes from corporate to divorce, we want it to recalculate. So everything's pretty much set up the way we had it. We did it correctly in the dialog box. The only difference is we didn't sort it originally. So I'll click OK. Now you can see the corporate average fees, $374.75, the divorce average, employment average, but they're all grouped together. Insurance average, patent average, real estate. You can see that they're all together. And then the grand average. So practice that. It takes a couple of times to kind of get the feel for what's going on there, but the most important thing to start out with is to get them sorted and grouped together before you apply your subtotal. All right, with that, that brings us up to grouping and ungrouping data on page 92. And as I mentioned previously, we are going to skip that. However, if you want to look through it, certainly do so. Make sure that you go over the chapter summary at the end. The concepts check is on page 96. And then please do the assessments at the end of the chapter. And as always, if you have questions, feel free to email me or call me.